Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dwayne Kimball, United States Army veteran and retired VA rating specialist. I am back with part two with my interview with Dr. Freeman, and we're discussing a controversial topic in the YouTube land and VA as it pertains to DBQ. So, welcome back, Dr. Freeman. Thank you for extending your time to come back for a part two and answer some more questions.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thanks for having me back.
Okay. So, Dr. Freeman, we left off part one of your contact information. So, can you give everybody your contact information, individuals, veterans that are military spouses that are looking to have a DBQ completed? They have their claims folder. They need a DBQ and/or Nexus, if necessary. How they can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. Well, Dwayne, the best way is my website. It's accessmed.com, spelled AXX as in X-ray, ESS as in Sierra, MED as in medical.com, accessmed.com. My office number is area code 337-484-1178. Again, it's 337-484-1178. And they can also email us at info@accessmed.com.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Freeman. So we're going to pick up pretty much a little bit where we left off, and we were talking about DBQs and some of what makes DBQs and Nexus statements sufficient. So and I know in part one we talked about, you had mentioned your training. You have gotten training by the third party contractor companies, and you veered off, and now you're doing your own thing. So with that being said, which DBQs or which conditions can you see a veteran for in person, or give a couple that needs to be done in person and then a couple that you can do by video?
Okay, very good. Because there's the musculoskeletal exams must be done in-house because it requires hands-on. It requires goniometric measurements for limitations of range of motion, say, for instance, a knee or a back. These are two exams we do quite often, but they should be done in-house, but because it requires measurements with certain tools for documentation of your objective findings. Now, other disabilities or claims that can be done via telemedicine or via video, telecom, is such as headaches, or if somebody might have chronic fatigue syndrome or something of that sort, which doesn't require hands-on and measurements of anything. It's a subjective diagnosis, and it could possibly be and can be done via video conference.
Okay. So there's a condition that a lot of veterans, and I've been receiving comments on my YouTube channel and then in some of my webinars, a lot of veterans are asking this question. As a rater, I've actually granted this particular condition on a secondary basis. I've seen it. But in the past year, a lot of veterans are claiming it and are getting denied when they go to these third-party contractors. And that condition is sleep apnea secondary to a mental condition. And I think where a lot of veterans are missing the boat, like we talked about in part one, when you show up for these exams, being prepared, looking at the DBQ, understanding, the questions. So in your experience as a previous third-party contractor, the training you had in your medical expertise, how can you explain? I know you can't go into detail because it's probably a long answer and stuff like that, but have you seen, or in your experience, rated or gave a positive opinion for sleep apnea, let's just say secondary to PTSD?
Well, it just depends. There's many neuropsychological problems such as PTSD and anxiety and depression and insomnia. And these are psychological problems that can, and the answer is yes, lead to sleep disturbances of the physical nature. Yes, there's certain components, and it depends on the the disability of the veteran is the initial disability. If they have central nervous system components, it can lead to a somatic system disability. And so those are words, let's just say, that are used for somatic, meaning the body, and central nervous system, meaning the brain. So there's psychological components that can lead to a sleep disturbance, such as central sleep apnea. You know, a lot of people are diagnosed. I know a lot of the medical professionals in the local area here that do practice sleep medicine say that, well, in the civilian world, if there's not enough central components to cause any pathology, which means problems, then they don't even document it, and they just document OSA, or obstructive sleep apnea. Well, I get my people who really understand sleep medicine, especially for the veterans. I said, well, listen, if there's a central component to sleep study architecture, then we need that information because that comes from the central nervous system. Hence, there's a great causation connection there for your veterans who have sleep apnea that can, if they understand what they need, get connected secondarily to a mental health issue.
And I'm glad you point that out, because my next question is, what what advice would you give a veteran who was preparing to undergo a DBQ examination? And so, with that being said, I know we talked about in part one the rationale.
Oh,
And what you just explained, I think, is key, because that causation,
yeah,
that's what, as a rater, that's what I'm looking for. That's what, I'm like, okay, where's the connection? Where is the studies, the
right,
literature? Where is
exactly.
that connection? So when we talked about in part one of the rationale, so it goes hand with this question, uh, common challenges and misunderstandings veterans face regarding DBQs. Because again, like I said in part one, that one veteran went out and paid this money for a Nexus that he didn't need.
Right.
So I think you were spot on with that when you talked about the causation and showing, okay, how you made that connection to provide a positive opinion.
Well, Dwayne, I think that we made a good point earlier, as well, as far as what the veteran needs to know. And it behooves the veteran to understand that when they get a medical opinion, if they would talk with their medical providers to say, what is your justification for that opinion? There are publicly accessible researched articles that can actually uh, justify a positive outcome or a positive opinion. So it would behoove the veteran to go, hey, research what's the most common uh, mental health condition that could lead to a sleep apnea or a sleep disturbance diagnosis. And you'll find tons of different articles out there that, if the medical provider doesn't have or doesn't know, you could bring with you. Be
Hmm.
prepared for your examination. You could research your own, bring it with you. Say, look, doctor, I was wondering, what is your thoughts about this? I see that the such and such is saying that there is a relationship, a positive correlation, which the VBA understands. But here, this documents a causation. And you could actually provide the medical examiner with such research to help its rationale to justify his medical opinion. So
Right.
you could be part of this exam yourself, like we said before. Know your DBQs, know how to answer the questions, help with the research so that you can have the greatest chance of a positive outcome.
That's what I talked about in part one. And a lot of people say, hey, I'm getting ready to go into this process. What should I do? And I'm like, invest your time. On my
Yes.
channel, I have over 400 videos you can watch for free. I have a book, VA Claim Success. It's a bestseller on Amazon, and $29.99. You get the book, you watch the free videos. You don't have to call me. You get 60, 70, 100% or whatever, percentage you think you should have. And that's it. So I think that's a key point that you made in being prepared. And I didn't think about this, even when veterans asked me, sleep apnea secondary to a mental condition, and you said it. Go out there, do the research, go to Google, and
Yeah,
look up these medical studies and take them with you to the
absolutely.
exam.
Absolutely.
So when the doctor's like, "Oh, well, one's a respiratory and the other one's a mental health or mental, so they have no correlation." Well, wait a minute, doc. This study that was done at
There you go.
this university or whatever
There
states
you
that it is.
Yeah.
Can you explain it? And
Yes. Very
it's going
good.
to be hard for somebody not to, they may come back with something. I don't know, but
You
you know,
never.
yeah, but it's, you may flip the light switch of that medical doctor and be like, wait a minute, this veteran he or she came prepared,
There.
you
Exactly.
know, so I can't pull the wool over their eyes. So thank you for pointing that out. So, Dr. Freeman, in your opinion, how significant is the impact of a completed, well completed, meaning sufficient for rating purposes, DBQ? What is the significant impact of that?
So it's very, very important. I think with any and all claims, if the government and the Veterans Administration has gone through the effort of developing a DBQ, they recognize it as very important. So
Mhm.
know your DBQ and know the answers to the questions on the DBQ. I think it's very important, as well as make sure you understand the process of Nexus and get a written Nexus that connects your current disability with an actionable injury, illness, or event that occurred while you were actively serving, and come prepared, like you had just said, with the research necessary to justify somebody's opinion, even if it's your opinion. So you're almost helping the medical provider help you submit your claim and having the greatest chance of a positive outcome. I think a DBQ is absolutely imperative. I think a nexus, when necessary, is imperative. And I think the rationale, when necessary, is very important.
Yeah. And I know you stated earlier when you talked about the presumptive conditions and not necessarily needing a nexus statement in on the Gulf War and terror. I'm not going to get into terror because a lot of veterans that's a whole nother that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
But have you done DBQs? I heard you mention chronic fatigue syndrome earlier, but have you done DBQs for veterans as it pertains to presumptive conditions?
Absolutely. And that's actually a good starting point for some of those veterans who started in the process, that can get those DBQs taken care of through virtual video conferencing or telemedical conferencing. And I keep saying telemedical because that's a platform that has encryptions for HIPAA compliance when you're sharing personal medical information or personal health information. So you want to look at if you know somebody who's you feel comfortable in, that has is knowledge and experience in the process of DBQs, Nexus, and Rationale, and you can get to them via telemedical conference or consultation. Be it known that those presumptives, many presumptives, not all, but many presumptives can be done without being in house.
And you mentioned earlier about finding the right doctor. So when you're looking for someone to complete a DBQ for you, and Nexus is if necessary. If you were, say, for example, you're not a medical doctor. You are, but just for this example, you're not a medical doctor, you're a veteran, and you need a DBQ. You can't get your primary care provider at your local VA medical center to complete a DBQ and Nexus if necessary, and you don't trust the third party CMP examiners. And you're like, okay, I found someone. What are a couple of questions that a veteran needs to ask that provider as it pertains to their experience, so they can get a little bit more comfortable if they want to move forward and having that particular medical provider to complete a DBQ?
Good question. I would advise the veteran to take a couple approaches. Number one is make sure that your medical provider has credentials that lends to disability medical evaluations, and then make sure they have the not just the knowledge but the experience in dealing with the Veteran Benefits Administration and their processes, using the appropriate verbiage necessary for taking your claim to adjudication and rating. If the second thing is, if they've ever been to a CMP exam and they like that medical provider, reach out to that medical provider so you know he's got experience. And if you got positive outcomes with him from one claim, you might want to consider reaching out to him for other claims. But the flip side of that coin is, if you've had bad experiences with your CMP exam, go to somebody that you can trust and you can count on. And it doesn't hurt if that medical provider is also a veteran.
Oh, wow, that's some good information. So it leads me to something else. Now you're saying if me, the veteran, I go to a third party examiner, and they're a third party examiner for the VA, and they do a DBQ, and I get a positive opinion, get granted, and I like that particular medical provider. During your training, there's no conflict of interest. If the veteran goes back and say, "Hey, you did my DBQ for the VA, I want another DBQ. Can you do it?"
Oh, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. As a matter of fact, I was thinking, Dwayne, that if you can actually request the third-party administrator to go back to see that doctor for your CMP exam.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because somebody asked that question today, this morning, on one of my YouTube videos, and I told him, I said, as a former Raider, I've been away from the process for about 5.5 years, but the actual exam request is called a 2507 medical request that we send out to QTC, and then they send it to whatever doctor, medical professional they want to complete that exam. So on that 2507 medical request, I know when I used to request exams, I couldn't, put that doctor's name down saying, "Hey, this veteran states they want to see this particular doctor." But the way I answered that question, I was like, it wouldn't hurt.
Well, actually,
it wouldn't hurt.
I think in the past I've had veterans when I was doing CMP exams for as a contract medical provider for third parties. By the way, I was doing it for all three of them: LHI, VES, QTC, and so it didn't matter. Here's the thing: is that these veterans, if they liked you, they would get with whomever the third party was for that time, and ask them. As long as this medical provider was within their area, I think it's 50 miles within their area, that they can go back and see them. And it was granted. Usually these third party contractors will grant you your request if they can.
Yeah.
But then if it's a private medical doctor, just make sure that they're credentialed as much as the VBA wants to see them.
Right. And one thing I told the veteran, I was like, "Hey, I never done it, but it wouldn't hurt to put that on the request. It wouldn't hurt, because if we're able, and like I said, I've been away from that process for 5.5 years. When I last requested a CMP exam, but there's room on there where you could do it. I had a veteran ask. He requested. He didn't request a particular doctor by name, but he said, "Hey, I need a doctor that speaks Spanish." And he said, "I don't speak any English." And I was like, "Okay, you served in the military." And I remembered when I was stationed at Fort Hood, I had a soldier from Puerto Rico, and he spoke, I could tell he had a heavy Spanish accent. And he said, "I just started learning how to speak Spanish about 8 months ago." He was freshly out of AIT. And so he signed up in Puerto Rico. They sent him out to California for a year and taught him English. So I'm thinking, maybe the veteran probably only did a couple of years, maybe same scenario. And I happened to look at his DD 214, and he was 11 Bravo radio operator, I think he said, and he had did 20 years in the Army. So I'm like, okay, you're saying you went through 20 years, you didn't speak English, but I get it. And, I think I put on there veteran states that they, need a translator or something like that, but I was like, wait a minute, you did 20 years in the Army, and you're saying you can't speak English.
As a radio operator at that, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I think, that's something that veterans can do. And I might even do a video on it and say, hey, if you had a good experience with an examiner and you're coming in for another condition, just request it. And hopefully if they put it on that 2507 medical request, it may go to that doctor. So before we wrap up, Dr. Freeman, can you give everybody your contact information again?
Yes, sir.
How they can get in contact with you?
You bet. Best way, Dwayne, is my website is accessmed.com, spelled AEAXXESSMED.com, or they can call my office at area code 337-484-1178, or email us at info@accessmed.com.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. So thank you again, Dr. Freeman, for taking the time to do this interview and ask these questions. I know a lot of veterans out there is going to find the information you provided very valuable and helpful. And everyone, my March live stream, Dr. Freeman will be with me to take some questions. Now, it's not going to be questions of Dr. Freeman, well, I'm doing this with my claim with medical study. He's not going to give you a rundown because that's going to take time.
Yeah.
Okay. So he gave you his contact, right? Just general questions. He gave you his contact information. Reach out to his staff. They'll be more than willing to answer any questions you have about getting any DBQs and Nexus statements done. So with that being said, as I always say, don't be frustrated, get educated, and make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and don't forget to share this video with your fellow veterans. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne.